Yeah, there's all kinds of new ways, right? Salvatore said it in the beginning of this content program already. It's all kinds of new ways. What was a challenge last year, now it appears to be a driver for transformation. And where the challenges were, there are new opportunities now.
Absolutely, and something what we discussed with Miguel yesterday, that I think we are like the events industry and the world itself has changed completely and has been transformed from the ground up,
Yeah.
and we can rebuild that world from the ground up. And I think it's super exciting to be living in these times.
It is a very resilient industry, and there's also a lot of creativity, of course, and creativity helps in conquering challenges. And what Salvatore showed us this morning, also in the numbers of the entries, for instance, or the number of the agencies that compete in this BR World competition for the awards, is that last year we had a small dip in the number of entries, but it's almost up to the same level of 2019 already. And it's the same number of countries that's competing here, and it's more or less the same number of agencies that's competing. So I think we learn by doing, and creativity helps. And this is maybe the industry that other branches also can learn from.
That's a great point. And if you take a look at things from the wider perspective, I think the events industry will be able to give so much to the business world, because event managers and team leaders and managers themselves will have to be creating, new experiences for their teams. And those experiences, and especially if we are talking about synchronous experiences, will be done through the meetings, small or big, internal or external. And I think the managers will need to create the skills or build the skills that many of the event profs are possessing, right? Such as facilitation skills, such as meeting design skills, and just in general, putting the participants at the center of things.
Yeah, let's talk about this some more, Jurai. And in an organic way, we just started our interview, I think. And I hope
I like that.
our audience was still here or is back from getting a cup of coffee or some snacks. I'd like to introduce you, my ladies and gentlemen, to Jurai Holub. And Jurai is the chief meeting designer at Slido. And Jurai has been in this event business on the interactive side for a long time now. And so he knows what's happening at this aspect of events and also in meetings. Maybe is that something that we can start with, Jurai? What's the difference between an event and a meeting?
There's been a lot of discussion, right, about the words. Very often we use the word of a meeting to describe an external event. But roughly speaking, how I perceive these two words, meeting is something that we organize internally within the companies, with our colleagues, with our bosses. An event, at least to me, that's something that we organize for a client, for our prospective buyers, for the community. So meeting, it goes in, event, it goes out.
Okay, that's and there are also all kinds of exceptions to be found, of course, but this is a way of making a difference between meetings and events. And what are the similarities?
Well, first of all, as we just discussed in a second, you always organize a gathering for people, and you want to create a great experience. And that's why I love the idea of meeting design and design thinking, to put the participant at the center of it and create an engaging, a valuable experience. No matter whether the participant is, as I said, a customer or a community member, or it's a team member, right? Like, we want to create a valuable experience for our participants.
And maybe that's also a pitfall, because if we look at events, we know that we have to design our event, and there are event designers all over. But meeting designers, are there a lot of meeting designers, or is it something that we just think of something that's happening every week and it's just putting people together in one room, digitally or physically?
I think we need to advocate for the role of a meeting designer more, right? Like, a lot of people do that as a part of their jobs. And this is, we're in the middle of December, and many companies are organizing the wrap-up meetings and the wrap-up events. And they do it as, like, naturally as part of their job, right? Like, we gather together and spend hours creating the content, discussing how we are going to deliver it to the team or to the customer. So that is ultimately the meeting design, right? Like, or event design. We just don't call it that way. It's a part of our daily agenda. But I believe that the meeting design skills will be the skills of the future. We will have to learn how to create these immersive experiences for people. So I think it's going to be beneficial for everyone if we give more flexibility to the role and to the terms such as the meeting designer or event designer. I think
And is it
it's going
needed?
to be great.
Is the need has the need grown because of the fact that we are meeting in a digital way nowadays?
Definitely, absolutely. And if you think about it, just a regular team leader, uh, he or she needs to be three in one, right? Like they need to take care of the technical side of things, they need to create the content, and they have to be great presenters and facilitators, right? So there's been a huge learning curve happening last year, and we will have to continue on this learning curve in 2022 as well, especially with the hybrid setup. Because as I told Miguel yesterday, this fall I spoke at 4 different events within 1 month, and they were all completely different. And I think this is going to be the new reality, that one size fits all will not work, or one approach to the events will not work, whether we think about it from the technical setup or just from the overall experience, right?
Okay.
There will be so many options.
I'm also thinking of the people that are going to their office next Monday and telling their boss what kind of skills he or she should have nowadays, and that if the skills are not there yet, that he or she has to brush it up.
Absolutely. And the scary thing from the employee's perspective is that there is a big gap and a big misconception between the quality of the meeting, how it's perceived by the team leaders and the meeting organizers and the participants. And we ran an internal research on that, right? And no surprise, managers think that their meetings are much better than how their meetings are perceived by team members. So there is clearly a gap. And another sort of like a scary thing, but at the same time an opportunity, is the fact that we need to advocate and we need to learn more of the facilitation skills. Because at business schools, at best, we are taught how to present information effectively. But do they really teach us how to bring people effectively into the conversation and create an inclusive experience? I don't think so. And this is a new thing that, first of all, we need to recognize, and then gradually start to build the skills around.
And there's also a nice question that we could ask our audience. The event skills, ladies and gentlemen, that you have as an event professional, do you also use those skills in your daily or weekly or monthly meetings in your own company? So do you design, and do you also facilitate, and do you also use interactive tools in your meetings like you do in your event world? Please put in the chat what you are using there and what kind of instruments maybe could be of use for other people. Jurai, your presentation here, or this interview, is called 50 Shades of Hybrid. So I'd like to explore the different extremes of these 50 shades. So if we would have a very light shade, the one end of the spectrum, what would it be? What would be hybrid in the lightest form?
Mm-hmm. So there are 2 ways how we can take a look at the 50 shades of hybrid. It can be a hybrid workforce, and it can be a hybrid event. So let's talk about the hybrid events, right? So hybrid event on one extreme would be a fully live event that we would be delivering, right? Like something what we used to be. And the other extreme would be a fully virtual event. But then right in between these extremes, you're going to have so many different variations and options. And if you add to the mix the opportunity to consume the content asynchronously as well as synchronously, that's going to, multiply the options that we would be having. So therefore, the 50 shades of hybrid. It won't be white, it won't be black, it will sit somewhere in between these 2 extremes.
Mm-hmm. But to explore these 50 shades, I think we have to know the extremes. So maybe to approach it from the other side, what would be the darkest shade of hybrid meetings?
The darkest shade would be coming back to the status quo, and I would say like putting people together into one room and exposing them to 8 keynote speakers in a row with
Okay.
no chance to interact, right? Something which we are very familiar with, and we wanted to actually change that, and now we have the opportunity to change that. So let's not fall back to that old model, because we know that old model didn't work even before the pandemic. So I would say like this is one of the extremes.
And putting a camera on that meeting is not hybrid enough. So that would be a dark shade of hybrid.
Absolutely, absolutely. And this is something that I hope will not happen. Like, if we want to create a valuable experience for online participants, we have to think about it like strategically and almost as a separate entity. And if you think about it, when you watch, for example, a soccer match, you've got the commentators, right? They guide you through that experience. During the break, they keep you glued at the TV because they provide you with extra content, right? Like the
Mhm.
interview with a manager, interview with a soccer player, or like they want to keep you engaged. And I think we will have to follow the same principles.
Okay.
Putting the camera on stage will not be enough.
So this is a new word here that you use. It's engagement.
Absolutely. And engagement is really about interaction, about keeping people, engaged, involved with the content, with the speakers. And I think it's absolutely fundamental. Otherwise, people will just switch the tab and check their metaverse, right? Or
Yeah.
check their Facebook or whatever they have
Oh, well,
open.
the metaverse could be on the light side, the light extreme side of hybrid. That could be the most extreme form of hybrid meeting in the metaverse.
Absolutely. And I think it's going to open incredible opportunities, because as we chatted like casually during the break, bringing 12 million people like together in one place for a concert, like
Crazy.
logistically
It's
it's
crazy.
impossible, right?
Yeah.
The biggest concerts in the world, whether it was Metallica or some other hugely famous bands, they brought together 1 million tops, 2 million, which is already insane on its
Yeah.
own. Now we're talking about 5 times, 6 times more people,
It's
and this
crazy.
is just the beginning, right?
Later in this content program, there will be another presentation about the metaverse by the guys from BeamUp. They're working very hard on their version of the metaverse at this moment. If I look at the chat, there is Andreas, who tells us that there's no connection between his event skills and the meetings that he's in. What kind of advice could you give Andreas here, Jurai?
Well, first of all, there are 2 areas where we can take the skills from the events industry and implement them in our business environment. And first of all is start designing your internal meetings with the same mindset like you are designing your events, right? So what is the purpose? Why are we meeting? Who needs to be there? How are we going to meet? And all these kind of things that we usually, how are you even going to market your event, right? Like, people are flooded by the
Even
meeting
if it's internal,
invitations.
even if it's an internal meeting.
Absolutely. We do a lot of marketing, for example, at Slido to market a certain internal meeting, because you are fighting for people's attention, right? And especially those optional meetings where you don't have to be, but still you want to present valuable learnings, valuable
Mhm.
findings, a valuable update. So, for example, we just come up with creative names such as insights into insights, when we are talking about the stuff that we learned from our customers, or what the stat, for example, instead of business statistics that you need to know, right? So we try to be even creative when we are marketing the internal meetings and the internal events. So that's one skill that you can apply. And the second skill you can apply, that's really your facilitation skills that you hopefully have as an event planner, right? Like the ability to bring people into the conversation and engage them throughout. So these are incredibly valuable skills.
Okay, so I hope that helps, Andreas. And to get back to this is the second time that you mention engagement. Someone once told me that there is a kind of a ladder. So the ladder starts with the lowest level is engagement, and then you have interaction, and then you have participation, and then you have co-creation. What's the level that we should aim for in our meetings, or especially for this audience, in our events? Should they all be co-creative, or is engagement enough?
Good question, and it's very hard to answer without the further context, right? Like, I would say, well, okay, let me put it in another way. Before the pandemic, there were not that many events that even reached the first level, right? Like that were engaging on interactive enough. And I think you have to build that confidence. You have to build that muscle, right? Like it's like with swimming. The first time you jump into a swimming pool, well, you're going to not be a Michael Phelps, right? Like you have to gradually build that skill, and the same thing goes for the events. So in case you have just a panel discussion after a panel discussion, try to swap one panel for a roundtable discussion. Try to bring in some polls to the traditional keynote sessions, right? And then build that kind of a muscle and try to experiment with new formats, try to experiment with new tools, and gradually take it to the next level.
Okay, so you're very experienced with these tools, but do we need tools, or are there also other ways to get to this interaction?
Well, until a certain size of the group, like you could do it without technology, right? Like if you are moderating a workshop of, let's say, 10 to 15 people, you can still crowdsource the ideas, for example, using the post-it notes. And it's absolutely perfect. And I actually love that style. I love touching the paper. I love writing down. But imagine you have 200 people in the room, you have 2,000 people in the room. How are you going to crowdsource those ideas and questions and whatnot, just the comments, without the technology? I don't think it's possible. And I think technology opens incredible opportunities in these areas.
Yeah.
You can really engage people at a large scale and even stimulate a conversation with hundreds, thousands, even tens of thousands of people at the same time.
But it's an instrument to get to. It's a means to an end. So it's an
100%.
instrument that you can. It's not a goal on its own.
100%. And this was our philosophy from day one. And that's why we learned so much actually from people like yourself, from JJ, for those of you who know him, and from other skilled moderators, because we saw the power of technology when you used it well during the events. Yeah. So absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's it makes a wonderful combination there. I totally agree. So if we would make a distinction between interactive events and events that have some interaction in it, of course, asking the question is answering it already, but maybe a better question could be, how can we avoid this pitfall? How can we make a real interactive event instead of making an event with just some interactive parts in it?
Great question. And I think it starts at the start. And I used it on purpose, like this kind of wordplay over here. If you want to create an interactive event, an interactive meeting, it's going to impact your agenda. It's going to impact the session. It's going to impact the people that you give the reins to, such as a skilled and skilled moderator, right? Like you will need to have a one or even two, right? And that is going to impact the sessions. As I said, like you are probably not going to have 8 keynote sessions in a row. You are going to have some kind of a co-creative sessions, right? Some kind of a workshops, some kind of panel discussions where we are going to leave one place for the audience, etc., etc. So I think if you really want to create and build an interactive event, interactive congress, it starts at the start, even before you start sketching.
So start with the interaction if you want to have an interactive event.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that also puts people in the right mood and in the right mindset. That things are that the organizers or the speakers on stage would like them to interact and would invite them in such a way that they would also be active during the whole meeting, always ready to help and interact.
Totally. And the interactive activities that you are going to use, and again, here we are not talking only about the usage of technology, we're talking about low-tech things, such as the roundtable discussions. You need to think of the logistics, right? Yeah. You need to think about how much time you need to dedicate to these kind of activities. And that goes very much hand in hand with content creation and the agenda creation. So it's not two separate things. You should really create content, agenda, and the interaction strategy all together.
Yeah, I think defining your goals helps. So you want upfront to know what kind of results you want to get. Using wonderful tools like Slido is one, and you can also use all kinds of other digital, non-digital tools, raising hands, body voting, all kinds of ways to get to the end, get to that result. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions for Jurai, please put them in the chat. There's still a few minutes that we can use for answering those questions. Jurai, if we would look at the future, at the new stage, what's the development that you see here?
I think 2022 will be heavily dominated by the hybrid. And by hybrid, in this case, I think it's going to be hybrid asynchronous events. And what I mean by that is that a certain portion of the content will be delivered live, but then will be either replayed or will be cut and edited and shared with the audience, right? So if we'll be talking about the hybrid, we'll be talking a lot about the hybrid asynchronous events in the upcoming year, and how to really maximize and repurpose the content that we do create either before the event or is delivered during the actual event. So
okay.
I think this is what's ahead of us for 2022.
And how can you keep up this sense of emergency that you have at an event when you're physically there? If it's asynchronous, how can you keep up that level of urgency?
Coming back to what I said earlier, like it really needs to be strategically planned. Very often, we do have for our internal all hands meetings that are already, they resemble the small conferences or medium-sized conferences of about 200 people. We have, for example, 2 moderators. One moderator that focuses on interacting with people sitting in the room, and one moderator that actually interacts with the online audience and with our colleagues who are joining virtually. And I think this really needs to happen because to keep people engaged in the virtual environment is, I would say, 10 times more difficult than when you have them in front of you.
Why?
Just the physical proximity, right? Like that is engaging on its own. The energy, you can feel the energy when the energy is up, but you can also feel it when the energy is down, right? To you as a speaker, to you as a moderator, you can wake people up if you think that the attention or the energy is waiting. But you're not getting this physical cues in the virtual environment. And on top of that, right now, Hans, I've got about 20 tabs open outside of this one where we are talking. So all that distraction, whether it's for pleasure or for work, is just a one click away, right?
Yeah.
So you need to just
okay.
Think about it strategically.
Yeah, there's the distractions of being in a home office as well. And well, I think if I can make use of this opportunity, Jurai, our next interview will be with Brent Kruger, and we will be talking about these home offices, so home studios even. So please stay for that interview as well. And later on, we will talk with Sietse Bakker, and he's the executive producer of the Eurovision Song Festival and the Eurovision Song Contest. They discovered that this online channel, that this social media channel was equally important as the presenters that were physically there in the studio. So he did it twice during the pandemic, and first time they discovered it, and the next time it was an equally important presenter as well that took care of the socials. So that's something that we learn, obviously. One last word of advice, Jurai, to our audience. How can we pick up, or how can we make our choices in the hybrid world that's ahead of us?
The hybrid world will be a lot about the experimentation, and let's not be scared of that. I know it is scary because we are putting up, our livelihood, our names up on the line. But if we manage the expectations well, if we set the expectations well at the start, like, folks, we are creating the new world. We're going to be experimenting a lot. So please bear with us. Some things will work, some things will not. It will give us a more of a free space to experiment and try new things. And trying new things and experimenting is the only way to create this new world. So be brave and experiment.
Be brave and experiment. That's a good one to end with. Thank you very much, Jurai. It was wonderful talking to you again. And this hybrid world is in front of us. And let's Let's go in there. Thank you very much, Jurai. I hope you'll be there for the rest of the program as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Have a good
Bye-bye.
one, everyone. Bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, so please grab a few minutes. It's in about 3-4 minutes from now, we will start our next interview. That will be with Brent Kruger. Brent is what I call an event technology guru. Probably he will use other words for himself. So that's it's just to put him up as a guru that will give you the opportunity to ask all kinds of questions to Brent here. And we will talk for about half an hour. So grab something to eat, grab something to drink, and I'll see you back in about 3 minutes.